all contracted providers. The agency is committed to maximizing all existing resources to provide effective and fiscally responsible services for children and families.
Next slide, Melanie.
Hello, again, my name is Melanie Govan, and I am currently the Interim Deputy Director of Delaware County Juvenile Court and Probation Services. Our department's role in the needs-based budget planning is simpler than that of CYS. Specifically, the needs-based funds only support juvenile court services directly provided to our youth and families. The funds do not support our department's general operations, salaries, or activities unrelated to direct service delivery to our clients. So over the next few minutes, Dan Burke, to my left, and I will provide some information on what our department does, what our goals are, what challenges we face, and what we will prioritize over the next fiscal year. Next slide, please. Oh, no, back one. I apologize. We do have 4 offices throughout the county: Media, Chester, Sharon Hill, and Havertown. For those who might be wondering, we did have an office close to 69th Street in Upper Darby, but that office has been relocated to Westchester Pike in Havertown, the Falcon Center, if anyone's familiar with the area. Having 4 locations allows our clients to visit us without significant travel, but it also allows our probation staff to be more intimately engaged with the schools, the police, and other organizations in the surrounding communities. Next slide, please. Juvenile Court and Probation Services operate under the authority of the President Judge of the 32nd Judicial District. We also operate under the authority of the Pennsylvania Juvenile Act and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court Rules of Juvenile Court Procedure. As you can imagine, a probation officer in juvenile court takes on many roles. Not only are we tasked with enforcing the orders of the court, but we supervise juvenile offenders, we assess the risk and treatment needs of our youth, we make recommendations to the court regarding appropriate disposition plans. We make referrals for programming that match the needs of our clients. We develop supervision plans that help our youth succeed. We have probation officers deliver interventions intended to build youth skills in order to reduce recidivism. And overall, we ensure the safety and well-being of our youth. Next slide, please. So when talking about juvenile justice in Pennsylvania, we're always talking about the concept of balanced and restorative justice. More specifically, this is the emblem for juvenile justice in the entire state of Pennsylvania. Probation officers in the courts are constantly striving to ensure that every disposition plan equally balances the 3 concepts you see here on the emblem. First, community protection. If it's determined that a juvenile represents a risk to their own safety or the community's safety, we may have to utilize tools like curfew, GPS monitors, or even a residential placement. Victim restoration, also referred to in some discussions as accountability. We have a victim service unit within our department that communicates with victims and obtains their feedback and concerns. Juveniles may be ordered to pay restitution, stay away from a victim, or complete community service to restore the victim and the community after acknowledging the harm caused by their offense. Finally, youth redemption is also referred to as competency development, which I prefer the term competency development. We aim to equip all juveniles referred to our department with the skills necessary to move on from juvenile court involvement and be productive, successful members of society. So for some clients, this includes simple concepts and skills like job readiness or time management. But for many of our clients, it also includes more complex issues like mental health management, addiction treatment, or overcoming trauma. Often, juveniles make a bad decision, they learn from it, and they move on. However, some juveniles will continue to break the law unless there's significant change in their thinking, attitudes, or behavior. And these are the juveniles who need us the most. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is, for those in the room, this is small. But what we're looking at here is information provided by the Pennsylvania Juvenile Court Judges Commission. Each year, JCJC publishes a report detailing statistics regarding statewide data. So as you can see, or if you can see here, Delaware County had 1,082 allegations filed with the court in 2023. So that means 1,082 cases came to the court. Philadelphia and Allegheny counties had more cases than we did, but other than that, we are close in number to our Class 2A counterparts. They're also in green on the map, if you're able to see the map. We have Lancaster County, Montgomery County, Bucks County, and Delaware County are Class 2A counties, and you're classified by the population in the county. So we are behind Philadelphia and behind Allegheny, but higher in population than the other counties in the state. As we expected, 2023 seems to show that we're returning to our pre-pandemic numbers, because in 2022, we only had 885 allegations filed. But in 2019, we were at 1,056. So now at 1,082, it looks as though we're returning to normal. Next slide.
Next one, answer this.
No, that's perfect, sorry. As you can see, this is a map of the placements, percentage of dispositions that include placement. I think the slide disappeared, but I think it'll be back, so I'll keep talking. As you can see, we are committed to using the least restrictive means possible in working with our youth, and our placement rate was only 1.4% in 2023. So that's low when you look at the rest of the state. It's around a little lower than the other Class 2A counties. I won't steal Dan's thunder. I know he'll discuss a little bit about why placement numbers have gone down, but wait lists, lack of detention center, and then denials due to complex needs are some of the things that are affecting those placement decreases. Next slide. So in 2023, our collaboration with the District Attorney's Office has produced increased and expanded diversion opportunities for children entering the delinquency system. So this resulted in a rise of cases diverted from formal court processing and in turn offered quicker expungement opportunities. Therefore, we anticipate higher numbers of pre-court diversion in 2024, which allows low-risk youth to avoid system involvement while leaving resources like probation officers' time, the court's time, and services available to the youth who actually need it. These are some of the common types of dispositions. In our court, pre-court diversion would be a case that's referred to the court, but it's handled outside of the courtroom informally by the probation department with the Commonwealth's agreement, of course. So those types of dispositions are increasing due to our work with the DA's office over the past year. Consent decrees are also a form of diversion. Sometimes clients are denying the offense, or sometimes there's a reason that the case has to go to court. But that doesn't mean diversion is off the table once it goes into the courtroom. A consent decree is also considered a diversion because there's no adjudication of delinquency. Probation, placement, those result when a child is adjudicated delinquent and determined in need of treatment, rehabilitation, and supervision through the court. And then another common disposition is that we're transferring the whole thing to another county because the child resides in another county in Pennsylvania. Ultimately, what I'm trying to convey is that the first two, the pre-court diversion and the consent decree, are favorable because they come with an automatic expungement. They don't come with the collateral consequences of an adjudication of delinquency. So increasing those is a good thing because it's giving children the opportunities to become less penetrated into the system. Next slide, please. Probations also maintain participation in a countywide multi-systems integration pilot program, which began in 2022. So operating under the guidance of the Stoneleaf Foundation and Georgetown School of Public Policy, the project partners include the Juvenile Probation Department, Children and Youth Services, the Office of Mental Health, and several local school districts, as well as the District Attorney's Office and the Public Defender's Office. The project aims to improve outcomes for children involved in multiple child serving systems by strengthening collaborative efforts through the development and implementation of specific protocols and procedures. So the big goals of the project include reducing recidivism, having fewer removals from the home, having more resilient families, increased diversion opportunities, improved prevention efforts to avoid juvenile justice involvement altogether. So while 2022 efforts focused on implementation of the pilot's protocols, 2023 efforts focused on data collection and refinement of the protocol practices. So we hope and we anticipate that 2024 should bring us some meaningful data analysis that can drive our quality improvement efforts at multi-system collaboration. Under the project, there are ongoing leadership meetings occurring regularly. Our data is being tracked for pre-pilot and post-pilot implementation comparisons. So in addition to these new processes, probation also continues to maintain community collaboration with police, schools, and other agencies. We even are offering information sessions to these stakeholders regarding county resources, how they can be accessed, and how our department works with them. Next slide. Okay, so the juvenile justice system enhancement strategy is something that I think that you see every year at this public meeting. Overall efforts to reform and improve juvenile justice in Pennsylvania started in 2005, but by 2012, Pennsylvania had developed this full juvenile justice system enhancement strategy, under which all 67 juvenile probation departments in Pennsylvania operate. Overall, the strategy has many components, activities, and effects. The underlying purpose is to continually work to achieve the best possible outcome for youth, families, and communities by focusing heavily on the use of evidence-based practices and collection analysis of data to improve decision-making. So we continue to develop various elements of the juvenile justice system enhancement strategy. Some of these initiatives have a direct impact on service costs, while others consist of in-house practices meant to enhance the probation officer's skills to lower risk levels of youth offenders. The objective is to have in-house practices and direct services from contracted providers work hand in hand to provide effective supervision. So the overall goal is to use evidence-based practices at every stage of the juvenile justice process when possible. We've had numerous JJS initiatives in various stages of development over the years. Leading up until now, we've worked to implement and refine and we're now moving into proficiency. We are proficient in the use of the YLS, Youth Level of Service. That's a evidence-based risk need responsivity assessment. We use a detention risk assessment. Our staff is proficient and improving in the use of motivational interviewing when working with our clients. We have trained our staff in something called ethics. That's a community supervision model that involves the probation officers doing skill building activities with the clients. And we also participate in case planning, and it's a structured process under which JCJC has trained our staff. So to come, we have plans to continue with the juvenile justice system enhancement strategy and implement the child trauma screening as well as the MAISY, which is a mental health screening, in our intake unit in 2024. Also, we're hoping and planning to collaborate with some state partners on using First Match, which is software that's being used in 5 Pennsylvania counties at this time to efficiently assist probation officers in matching juveniles with residential services based on historical data and proven results. So that's a big undertaking for 2024. I will now stop talking and pass it over to Dan Burke for some additional information.
I'm Dan. I'm going to discuss juvenile probation's recent out-of-home placement and detention admission trends, along with juvenile probation's accomplishments in fiscal year 23-24, as well as the challenges and priorities facing probation moving forward into fiscal year 24-25. As you can see, out-of-home placements have steadily decreased every year from fiscal year 12-13 through fiscal year 22-23. In the last year, probation saw their first increase in placement admissions in over 10 years. It's only a slight increase. As you see, placement admissions are still only about 10% of where they used to be about 10 years ago. We're seeing about 52 now, and 10 years ago we were well over 500-600 juveniles being placed a year. So even with this small increase, it's still a very low number. Next slide. Probation has also experienced a steep decline in detention admissions to coincide with the decline in placement admissions every year from fiscal year 12-13 through fiscal year 22-23. As you can see, the decline in detention admissions had been significant every year from 12-13 through 22-23. These numbers dropped even more significantly beginning in fiscal year 2021, as the decline was aided by the closure of the Delaware County Juvenile Detention Center. The detention center closed in March of 2021, at which time probation was only able to utilize other counties' detention centers and private detention providers, which both had very limited bed space availability. Over the years since, probation has contracted with any and all available detention providers. While detention beds have been difficult to secure, probation has managed to secure enough beds in recent years that the number of juveniles entering detention in fiscal year 23-24 did increase for the first time in over 10 years. Despite the small increase in detention admissions, you can see that the overall detention admissions are still similar to overall placement admissions, only about 10% of where they were about 10 years ago. Really have decreased significantly since that time. Next slide. One major accomplishment realized by juvenile probation in fiscal year 23-24 was seeing a decrease in the average length of stay for juveniles at detention, with the average length of stay dropping from 36 days to just 22 days. Probation also continued to contract with new vendors to provide supplemental shelter and secure detention services in the years since the closure of the Delaware County Juvenile Detention Center. Probation contracted with other counties and private providers to secure any possible available detention beds. Though even with these new detention services, detention beds are still difficult to secure. Probation also saw a decrease in recidivism rates for juveniles within 1 year of discharge from out-of-home placements, as the number of juveniles replaced within 1 year of discharge from placement dropped to its lowest amount on record, with just 8% of juveniles being replaced. Probation also expanded placement resources throughout the state by contracting with an array of additional placement providers in fiscal year 23-24. However, placement options remain very limited, and finding appropriate out-of-home placements for our most difficult youth remains a challenge. Next slide. One of the major challenges facing Delaware County juvenile probation going into fiscal year 24-25 will continue to be the lack of local detention. While only approximately 2% of youth entering the juvenile justice system require secure detention, not having a local detention option makes serving these youth extremely difficult. Without a local detention option, probation has had to rely on supplemental secure detention facilities through other counties and private providers. The lack of detention options has also led to an increase in the number of youth on GPS monitoring services as the youth are awaiting residential services. Another challenge facing juvenile probation is the current lack of available mental health services, drug and alcohol services, and specialized residential placement settings. There are currently long waiting lists for all of these types of services as a result of the very limited options available. In addition, probation has experienced an increase in the number of juveniles being denied admission into these programs due to the complexity of the cases. Next slide. The top priorities for juvenile probation as we move forward into fiscal year 24-25 are to emphasize strategic planning using the Pennsylvania JJS plan and state and local initiatives. Another priority is to increase collaboration with Pennsylvania OCIF to ensure adequate funding. This is, of course, one of the main goals of the needs-based budget process. As always, juvenile probation will continue to focus efforts on primary prevention to reduce or eliminate the risk factors that lead to delinquency. Next slide. Another priority for juvenile probation in fiscal year 24-25 is to continue to develop our local resources and increase access to statewide resources, as well as to continue the use of the least restrictive and most appropriate setting to rehabilitate juvenile offenders. Going into fiscal year 24-25, juvenile probation will also strive to maintain the historically low recidivism rates for juveniles both replaced and rearrested within 1 year of discharge from placement through utilization of an array of post-placement in-home programs. Recidivism rates are at an all-time low in 23-24, so probation hopes to match or exceed these efforts going forward. It's also a top priority to decrease the use of secure placement facilities. Operation hopes that enhancing aftercare and reentry services days of care for juveniles placed in secure out-of-home placements. I'm going to hand this over to Nelson, and he'll discuss the detention.
Next slide, please. I'm Nelson Walker, and I'll address juvenile detention and rehabilitation services, the accomplishments in FY 23-24. The department contracted the Center for Children's Law and Policy to conduct baseline evaluation of Delaware County's primary prevention, diversion, and reentry services. Initiatives include a full-time
facility fellow who is juvenile justice subject matter expert in the state of Pennsylvania, the National Assessment Center, the subcontractor, a needs assessment of 500 Delaware County youth, an analysis of current juvenile justice related data, a review of Delaware County's prevention and front-end diversionary efforts and programs, a set of recommendations for improvement and developed by system and community stakeholders. Juvenile detention and rehabilitation service accomplishments FY 23-24 continue. Next slide, please. The department continued to meet with community partners and stakeholders to gain perspective of what is needed in the community for those most impacted by crime, poverty, and incarceration together. JDRS used those recommendations along with the feedback of local system leaders and national trends to pilot programs. Next slide, please. The challenges for FY 23 and 24. A recent study by Juvenile Court Judges Commission called the Pennsylvania Secure Detention Bed Gap Analysis showed that there was a surplus of 60 detention beds at current staffing levels with local partnering facilities. With the operational constraints of local partners with an emphasis on staff recruitment and retention, having a reliable resource for our local juvenile courts has been our department's greatest challenge. Our priorities for fiscal year 24 and 25. During the period where the department is without a local center, the Department of Juvenile Detention and Rehabilitation Services will continue to collaborate and negotiate potential partnerships with neighboring detention centers in the Southeast region with the goal of establishing a long-term resource for secure care services using a regional-like model. Also, JDRS look at the impact of reallocating resources away from youth detention and investing more in community-based programs. This will guide the development of several potential pilot programs in the implementation year. Those potential projects are as follows. Next slide, please. Youth Evening Resource Centers, addressing out-of-school time for communities most impacted by incarceration, focusing on pro-social activities and food disparities in safe, supervised community spaces. School prevention programming, addressing root causes and early indicators of delinquency, including targeted intensive service delivery, safe corridor programming, the planning of youth assessment centers, connecting youth and their families to available services, partnering with district attorney to expand resources, youth aid panels to the highest risk jurisdictions in Delaware County, youth workforce development and reentry programs using restorative justice practices and principles, a credible messenger outreach program providing support to confined youth and their families. Next slide, please. Juvenile Detention and Rehabilitation Services priorities for FY 25-26. Youth Evening Resource Centers, addressing out-of-school time for communities most impacted by incarceration, focusing on pro-social activities and food disparities in safe, supervised community spaces. School prevention programming, addressing root causes and early indicators of delinquency, including targeted intensive service delivery, safe corridor programming, the planning of youth assessment centers connecting youth and their families to available services, partnering with district attorney to expand resource youth aid panels to the highest risk jurisdictions in Delaware County, youth workforce development and reentry programs using restorative justice practices and principles, a credible messenger outreach program providing support to confined youth and their families. Next slide, please. If you have additional questions, you can reach out to Children and Youth Services Email Vanessa Pierre at pierrev@delcosa.org. The phone number is 610-447-1000. The Office of Juvenile Probation, email Danielle DiMatteo at dmatteo.co.delaware.pa.us. Phone number is 610-891-4721. You can reach out to the Office of Juvenile Detention and Rehabilitation Services. Email Nelson Walker at walkerin@co.delaware.pa.us. And the phone number is 610-490-1859.
Are there any questions?